All right. Welcome everyone to the August 1st meeting of the Militarized Equipment Policy Ad Hoc and all of the other policies that will be a part of it. We are missing Commissioner Jackson Castaigne tonight. She won't be joining us. Commissioner Jordan, I haven't heard from, but I do expect them at some point. We got members of the department. We got members of the community. We want to talk a little bit about scheduling going forward and whether or not we need to add days, which days those might be, as well as talking a little bit, excellent, talking scheduling, talking about the department's update about impact reports, and talking about how we might best utilize our time in whatever sessions we decide on, and maybe schedule out certain days for certain policies. And we may be moving a lot of editing or work offline in between these meetings. So first, why don't we talk about scheduling? Let's see, Mr. Lindsay Poland, you sent an email discussing sort of our deadlines and the work that we're looking, or the timing that we have to work through. I think by your calculations, we got to get a lot of these policies on by, I think, the September 22nd Oakland Police Commission meeting. Tell us a little bit more.
Takes me a second to unmute. I think I pretty much laid it out in that email. I just worked backward from what extension was given by the commission for submission of the use policy and impact reports to the city council. That was the maximum. The 90 days was the maximum that's in the local ordinance. And so I just tried to work back from there. I don't have a formal schedule or calendar of police commission meetings. So I just worked on the basis of, it's on recess in August, and then we'll resume on a regular schedule in September, and just tried to work back from there to see when it would be needed.
Does anybody feel differently about our deadline, when that might be? Seems right to me, but I'm open to hearing any other thoughts about when our deadline might be, internal deadline for this ad hoc and its policies might be. Or whether we need every single policy through on that day. I guess that's also an open question.
I think by the local legislation, you would need every policy that is in the local ordinance, and not necessarily all the ones in the AB 481 legislation. So in that respect, I believe drones and robots are in AB 41, but not in the local ordinance. In general, the local ordinance has more requirements in the components of the document for each type of equipment than AB 41 does. So the pieces of the impact reports that have to be submitted under the local ordinance, there's a bunch of those that are not in AB 41, but the local ordinance has the tighter timeline. So
this may not be too pleasing to DQ, but are you saying that drones and robots can be pushed off a little bit and doesn't have that 9/22 deadline?
I think so. Let me check while we're meeting, just to be sure that those are not in the local ordinance. Let me check.
While you're doing that, let's talk a little bit also, while you're also checking for anything else that we might be able to sort of put off until more towards the end or possibly after that 9/22 deadline. Let's talk about whether or not we think that we need to add days. And then if we do, which days? I'm getting the sense based on the work that we're doing, even if though we're taking very good use of each one of these sessions, that we're gonna need more days.
Yeah, I think the department probably agrees. We do need more days just to make sure we get the time to, go through things and answer questions, wrap things up, et cetera.
David?
Sorry, distracted. Kids.
No worries.
Yeah, I mean, it is starting to feel like more days than we knew going into this. This is part of the conversation going into it, that we may have to do this every week instead of every other week, or maybe even twice a week during crunch times if some of these things gone. Yeah, I mean, I guess I can commit to doing a little bit more for sure. Although I know it's, the people from the department and Jennifer and John who are doing the sort of lion's share of the editing. So I think that we're also asking a lot of them as well.
So the one other piece, Commissioner Shea, that could be, is not in the local ordinance and it's in AB 41 is command and control vehicles. That's generally not a very difficult one to do, but I think that is one that could be postponed somewhat.
It may help commissioners sort of get to that third thing that you were talking about, which is the idea of everything that we need in terms of the agenda to see, okay, where are we? And if it looks like, man, we're, it's not going to be humanly possible to get, 5 policies done in one ad hoc, then we'll probably say, okay, we need some more. But just an agreement on which things need to be done. And if we have that list, then we can kind of work backwards a little bit from there. So.
Well, we definitely do have that list from the department's submission to the commission. Let me just pull that up unless one of you has it handy.
Hey, John, do you happen to know the dates for AB 481? I don't know when the 180 days would be for Oakland.
It would be 188 days after May 20th. So that would probably be like the 3rd week of November. And again, that's by the time by which it would have to be approved by the city council. Not submitted to the city council, but approved by the city council.
So we'd probably have a few weeks, but not many after September 22nd, like maybe 2.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There it is. All right. Okay. Help me out by counting. Crowd control, chemical munitions, specialty impact, armored vehicles. We have unmanned aerial, which we are saying could be a little bit past that September deadline. We have the overall militarized equipment policy. What am I missing? We have robots.
Those can also be put off. Rifles, the LRAD, breaching equipment, the flashbang. Did you include that?
I am now 11.
Jesse, it's the answer is 12 with everything. And so that would be 10 if you drop the 2 that we mentioned, the drones and the command and control vehicles.
Does that include the any of the non-militarized equipment, but related policies, K3, K4, and K5.
So that's overall drones, armored vehicles, LRAD, command vehicles, robots, assault weapons, less lethals, flashbangs and tear gas together, breaching equipment, crowd control equipment.
Do we need to do use of force reporting or tactical operations to comply with the statute?
No, at least our department's policy, our positions now.
I mean, the thing is, if authorized uses and prohibitions is not in the equipment policy, like if it lives somewhere else, then we would be referring to that.
So yeah, we are not, for each one of these, we are adhering to not a template, but an idea that each one of those things that's required in either 41 or 9.65 is in there. So it authorized use, prohibited uses, training, and all the rest of the things, description that are required by the law.
As of including today's session, we will have four sessions before September 22nd. And we are 4 policies, and 5. We've gone over 5 policies at least once. I think we're going to need more days. Yeah. All right. Then the next question is which days? And how do we choose that? Do we want to choose that now? Do we want to choose that over email? Anybody?
Maybe we just throw out some proposals and then maybe choose it by email. I'd say probably I propose that we do every Monday as opposed to every other. And then if some other folks kind of think about it, maybe throw out some proposals and then we kind of vote or just decide.
I think we could. Go ahead, David.
Sorry, I was gonna say, Jesse and I are both on another ad hoc that meets that other opposing Monday. Although it's possible that we could just alternate between the ad hocs, between the two of us, for the remainder of the next 4 weeks, or something like that. I don't know what you think about that, Jesse.
I think that's probably fine. Or we talk with Commissioner Howell about rescheduling some of the ones for the next 2 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll check in with him. Also suggest the off Thursdays, meaning the Thursdays that we don't have police commission meetings. That would be the 18th, September 1st, and September 15th.
Those work for us, I think.
Let's see, that would add, if we don't add the 8th, meaning next week, but so that Commissioner Jordan and I can talk with Commissioner Howell about scheduling. Instead, meet the 18th, the 22nd, the 29th, the 1st. September 5th is Labor Day. The 12th and the 15th. That would give us an additional 3 sessions, meaning 6 hours. I think that would probably, go ahead.
Do you have any flexibility to meet earlier on Thursdays?
I can probably make it work. David, I know you're also like me, rushing home or juggling between day job.
I can try, but I think it's likely that I'm going to be, 10 to 15 minutes late. Trying, to if we move it much earlier, maybe even as much as a half an hour. A lot of my meetings ends like are supposed to end at 5:30, but often run, and so it's 6 is kind of an optimal time for me. But if it's a priority, I can definitely try and move some stuff around.
We could also potentially add in the 11th since we canceled the
Yeah.
August 11th, since we canceled the police commission meeting.
Yeah, I can't do the 4th this week, but I can probably do the 11th.
I think the 4th is probably too short notice.
Mhm.
So if we start, okay, so the 11th, the 15th, the 18th, the 22nd, the 29th, September 1st, September 12th, September 15th, and potentially September 19th. What was that? That would give us 9 sessions, not including today. And that is 18 hours, 20 hours including today. I think that'll probably get it done.
Yeah.
Right.
How's the rest of the group feel about that? That's a big commitment.
Well, we can make that work.
I have to, go ahead, Jennifer.
I assistant teach a class Thursdays 6 to 8, so I will try, but it might be not possible for me to get out of this.
And I am about to go on sabbatical at the end of this week. So, I could probably bend it to like attend some, but I won't be able to attend all those, I'm sure.
Okay. Those dates are out there. I will follow up email about making sure about scheduling. Why don't we all go back, check our books, and go from there and start setting dates. I will start setting those dates by the end of the week, since we might do August 11th. Thank you all. All right. And then we can talk a little bit about scheduling, which policies and what days for the 11th or the 15th, whichever is going to be your next day. Okay. Anything else on these 2-3 topics? Let's go twice. Great. Okay. I'm going to follow up on one thing that I had mentioned. I saw that Mr. Lindsay Poland had emailed about, which was the issue of mutual aid. And at the 2 weeks ago, I had asked that both the department as well as community members sort of take a look and come up with proposals.
I think he cut out.
David, are you able to reach him via another means?
Yeah, 1 second.
Cool, thanks.
All right. Hope he responds.
Hey, Erickson.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Lieutenant Turner, do you want to just sort of maybe pick up where we were document-wise, or who else is on?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think there's anything keeping us from discussing the one sort of remaining issue, K7, because I think Commissioner Shea kind of wanted us to talk it out, and I think the department's landed pretty close to what you guys have discussed. Yeah, so
Yeah. So, so yeah, the issue at hand is where we left off with mutual aid. So do you want to share with us what you guys came up with?
Yeah, let's see. Jeff Thompson, can you share that that paragraph for, and so we took basically what I think you all suggested in terms of, military equipment should not be used by any law enforcement agency or member in this jurisdiction unless the military's equipment is approved for use in accordance with the law. So understanding, right, that the issues, I guess, that we have brought up around our policy and the fact that we cannot require others to follow OPD policy, but at the same time, we understand that we definitely can say that other agencies should not be bringing in anything that is not approved through the law. So, for instance, any other California agency, they're going to have to go through the AB 481 process, and if they have equipment for some reason that is not approved, like I saw the sheriff's office apparently has a 50 caliber machine gun, that they couldn't bring that.
What?
Right. That's an aside. I saw it on Twitter. Yeah, they say they're getting rid of it. But
Berkeley has one too.
okay, cool. Yeah, but in any event, they've got this stuff for military that stuff like that they would not be able to bring it or use it in this jurisdiction unless it's approved for use in accordance with the law. So we're hoping maybe that's a sort of gets to the spirit of what you're saying without implicating us in requiring policy on them, our policy.
Go ahead, John.
So I guess the law is a little vague to me. Like if it's, if you're talking about AB 41 policies, then that doesn't really, like, the sheriff in Berkeley have 50 caliber weapons and that have been approved in accordance with their law. In Berkeley's case, it's already been approved. So that wouldn't really address, like, the mutual aid OPD mutual aid policy is much more specific in terms of saying, when you come in, we're gonna have a briefing and we're gonna tell you what is prohibited here. So why not also brief them about what is not just prohibited, but what the policies are for use of those types of equipment, and spell out here that OPD retains command.
Well, I think our objection to that is I think what some of the things that Assistant Chief Allison has said is that we cannot. It's just in terms of jurisdiction. When you bring another agency in, the mutual aid policy says that we advise them and we ask them. It does not say anything about telling them. And then the second thing is that especially around a policy and training, it's very difficult to say, this is what we train, this is how we do things. We want you to do the same thing. When they might have a different policy, a different way of doing things. So that's kind of our hesitance. We're definitely believe that when we are thinking about, and there's probably an area where we can say, we need to consider these things, and we shall consider that, what their policies are, or if their use would, comply with our policies or something like that. But I don't think there's a way for us to dictate what other agencies will do.
Yeah, for me, what comes into mind was that incident right here on 96 with that young man called Eric Salgado, being gunned down by CHP, I believe. I don't know what type of firearm they used for Eric Salgado, but I think the unborn baby was killed right there and then, and of course Eric Salgado was murdered as well. But um, when it comes to that, like, is there no oversight on that? Like, hey, like CHP don't come in all aggressive, like it's just a vehicle, at the end of the day, and you're probably putting more harm's way and spraying up the whole area, um yeah, that's what comes to mind when I'm hearing this. But yeah, so are we just advising, like, don't use this lethal force, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a difficult point because
Mhm.
it is an issue where we have other agencies with other jurisdictions. So for instance, like the sheriff's office, they answer to the county board of supervisors, the highway patrol answers to the highway patrol commissioner, and then the governor. And so as much as we'd like to, and we definitely do, for instance, ask them, when you're doing these things, this is how we want to do them. When we are asking them to come in, we ask them to do things. We ask them to do things certain ways. But in other instances, we sometimes cannot control the way that they are trained or their policies.
And if I can just piggyback on that, what Lieutenant Turner said, I know we're talking about mutual aid, but we do have a lot of agencies that work in the city of Oakland that are not a product of mutual aid, but they do have jurisdictional authority here, CHP being one of them, the Sheriff's Department, BART, Oakland Housing Authority, certainly any number of the federal agencies can come in and operate in their own realm without our request or even without, in some cases, our knowledge. But when it comes to mutual aid, I think, obviously we do brief with the teams. Obviously, they have to be deployed in a manner according to our deployment. To Lieutenant Turner's point, when it comes to usage, what they train with and what their governing bodies see as way that they can prevent any kind of liability to their agencies, it's hard to control, but we certainly can tell agencies responding, hey, you know what, we don't use this tool, and advise them, but we don't necessarily have the authority to tell them that they cannot use it. And we've run into that repeatedly recently with some of our mutual aid scenarios.
Jennifer?
Thanks. It's a good point that Erickson brings up, because while that was a overlapping jurisdictions situation that he's describing, what happens if there were a situation in which CHP is called in a coordinated call in a mutual aid situation? What should they be allowed or not allowed to do in that situation? This morning I was reviewing the Alameda County less lethal weapons policy, and it explicitly says that the head and the neck are valid target areas, including in crowd control situations. And that's something that's explicitly prohibited by AB 48, the new law. And so that leaves me with kind of two questions I'm thinking about. One is, what does the department plan to do if you do ask for mutual aid in a crowd control situation, knowing that you would be having an agency coming in that permits having head and neck shots, which is against California law? And then the other question I'm thinking about is, Berkeley Police Department's policy was recently approved, and they, in their coordination section, they expect for the outside agency to comply with their policies. And I'm wondering what might be different in Oakland compared to Berkeley.
I thank you for those questions, and they're very good questions. I think one of the things that is worth pointing out, obviously mutual aid runs a whole realm of usage and response from agencies. It could be anything from crowd control, as was indicated, all the way to we have somebody armed with a rifle shooting, at a corner walk and don't walk. We can't get to her. Maybe we're not proximate. We need help from another agency. and they just respond. It's a kind of an emergent, exigent response. We need help, they go, and it's usually high risk, high need for safety. When it comes to crowd control, I mentioned at the beginning of the ad hocs that we are certainly going to court on 2 federal lawsuits that are going to ultimately outline certain terms when it comes to specific cooperation and collaboration with mutual aid. As you may know, we're currently under a temporary injunction from the suit that was put in place a while ago, and that court case has continued on. So when it comes to mutual aid and crowd control, situations like that currently under the temporary injunction would not allow us to deploy agencies with prohibited weapons or munitions to positions at all, unless there's an exigent, very emergent situation, and really make every effort to deploy them in secondary positions where they would not have frontline crowd contact. So for that scenario, if they have an impact condition and their deployment strategy or methodology is in prohibited targeted locations, or maybe they're using ammunition that we don't necessarily carry or we prohibit, they'd put in secondary positions. So I think, we're going to ultimately, under the crowd control policy, have a very clearly defined order of deployment when it comes to mutual aid. Again, even similarly, we could not prohibit them bringing the munitions into the fold. It's along on how we deploy. But there are other situations where we might need to use mutual aid that aren't necessarily geared towards First Amendment. As I mentioned, there could be scenarios where it's more of a violence outcome. And those instances of violence, whether it's a barricaded suspect or a person armed with a weapon, may require other intervention techniques that are not only a safety issue for the responding agency, but may need intervention that we, as a police department, might not be able to respond to, or maybe we are spread out in a manner where we're dealing with a bunch of violent encounters. So I can't speak to Berkeley's policy on requiring agencies to follow their policies. I'd be curious to take a look at it, because I don't know if that's in a crowd control context, or if that is in every mutual aid scenario. And if it is in every mutual aid scenario, how they would actually implement that. Because the agencies that I've had an opportunity to correspond with, they've all said that they are mandated to follow their own policies, regardless of where they're at, because they have not only the training behind those, but they have policies that govern it. And if they start operating outside of their policies, it sets them up for liability within their agencies.
I can answer the Berkeley question, but I see John has his hand up.
So actually, the city council can say that another department can't bring in any equipment. Maybe you can't, but the city council has jurisdiction over what operations occur in the city. And that's why all these different cities, not just Berkeley, I think I put a list in there. There's Alameda, BART, Burlingame, El Cerrito, Emeryville, Fresno, Hayward, Sacramento, San Diego, San Jose, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know why Oakland can't do that when all these other cities have. I would also note that the phrasing, look closely at the phrasing. It applies to coordination with other agencies, right? So an agency like CHP comes in, or there's an exigent circumstance and an agency comes in. That's not necessarily coordination. But in addition, if you look closely at that language, it applies to equipment. It doesn't apply to the way that equipment is used. So I think I want to emphasize that, because there is, I believe, jurisdiction and capacity for the city to say this equipment cannot be brought in by a law enforcement agency. Finally, I want to just go back to the suggestion the recommendation in the email that I sent on Friday, which is to insert some language into the mutual aid policy that expands the instruction piece. I understand that the litigation will definitely apply to chemical agents, but I believe that if the instruction piece were expanded, acknowledging that that's not a prohibition, it's not like, it's not binding, but I think it would be important in a mutual aid circumstance where there's a briefing, that the briefing not only applied to less lethals, but it briefed the visiting agency about existing policy for use of all types of military equipment within Oakland. So that's several things I'm putting out there. I'm not sure how you want to handle those.
David?
I actually like to hear what Jennifer was going to respond to the previous comment from folks from the department for Jumper. And I can.
Sure, I can do that. So the question, actually, I'm really sorry. The question was about Berkeley, and that's all I can remember.
I think it was Chief Allison mentioning having a question about something about the Berkeley policy.
Oh, thank you. Yes. So I believe Chief Allison asked whether it applies only for less lethals or if it's in general, and it is in general. It's kind of the same section that we've got here with the coordination with other jurisdictions. And in that section, it just says that any external, this is not verbatim, that any external agencies have to comply with their policies. Last time, Jesse, you had asked us to do a little bit of looking into how other agencies respond and or how they plan to act if they retain the policies for mutual aid, for military equipment in the event of mutual aid. I started that. I might need a little bit of help with introductions, maybe from Chief Allison or from someone else. I did try to reach out to Berkeley. I tried, one person got voicemail. I tried calling their non-emergency number and wasn't able to navigate the phone tree. So I've tried a few agencies, but right now I am navigating non-emergency lines and hoping to be able to get to a human.
Why don't you send me a list of the ones that you have and the ones that you haven't, and then perhaps it might be working with Lieutenant Turner about contacting their respective places. But before we even get to that, let me just make 2 or 3 observations. First, with respect to this particular portion, we are not suggesting that, I don't think anyone is suggesting, I think we're all on the same page, that scenarios where outside police agencies coming to the city of Oakland would be part or fall under this, because it's not request for mutual aid, not coordination. And in fact, I think we should say that actually in this section so that we make that extremely clear, right? That's police, those are departments working independently of any particular request, having coexisting jurisdiction and coming to the city of Oakland to handle their business. The second is, the second observation I wanted to make was that the difference between the 2 sides of language is in accordance with the law and in accordance with this policy. I think there's a perception at this point that phrase means that any outside agency that is requested to come to the city of Oakland is required to go through necessarily each and every piece of training, each and every piece of qualification, each and every piece of authorized use. I don't know that it says that, because if we take the phrase of this policy, right, that is here, is that those particular agencies also have a militarized equipment use and that it's been approved, and we should be able to assume that by a certain point, all of those agencies would have that. Does anybody disagree with that? I see Lieutenant Turner shaking his head, which strikes me as saying that if the phrase is approved for use in accordance with this policy, all that means to say is that for those pieces of equipment, they have policies for them, and they have a militarized equipment policy.
Yes.
Does anyone see it differently?
Could I ask, would it be all right, Joe, if you could just kind of put it up there so we can all see visually? I'm not sure I'm getting exactly what Jesse's saying.
I will copy and paste into, nope, we don't have chat. Oops, my fault.
I know, yeah.
Alright. So the difference between, I'm looking at the language from Mr. Lindsay Poland's email, and the language difference between the departments and what's in that email are the words, the law versus this policy. That's the difference, right? And if the language is this policy, all it means is that there's military, that department, when they come in, they have equipment policies and a militarized equipment policy. Is that right?
No, I think not, because it's unless the equipment is approved in accordance with this policy. So if, for example, let's take the 50 millimeter machine guns, right, that Berkeley has. Oakland does not have that equipment approved in accordance with this policy. It is approved in accordance with the law for Berkeley. So if you say in accordance with the law, you're basically saying if it's approved in accordance with their respective policies under the law. So the in accordance with this policy would basically say, look, unless this jurisdiction has taken a look at this piece of equipment, regardless of what the use policy is for it, we're not going to approve it coming in. The 50 millimeter can't come in because this jurisdiction has not approved its use here. But if you've got a less lethal that you've approved in accordance with the law, it's maybe a different use policy, and we have also approved it under our policy, then it can come in. That's the difference.
I think that leads to so many issues, though. For instance, the rifles that we have. Let's say instead of Colts, they have Noveske or something else, some other brand. That just leads the department, to an area where there's a lot of area for liability.
Sorry, sorry, Lieutenant Turner. I kind of disagree. I don't feel like it's that nebulous. I think that the policy, the ordinance is written here locally is really based on caliber, not brand of weapon, right? That it doesn't mention what those what make and model those patrol rifles are. It talks about caliber, right? And I think it does specifically disallow things like 50 caliber rifles. Also, is this a 50 caliber rifle or a 50 caliber machine gun? Because we're getting confused here. Not that any of them should be used on anywhere, but I'm curious.
I think it has a 50. It has a fully automatic setting on it.
Like are you? Is it? Because I mean, are you talking about like an M2 machine gun,
It's a Barrett 50 millimeter.
So a semi-automatic Barrett rifle.
Yeah, you may be right. Maybe it's not fully automatic. That could be.
I don't know that there is a fully automatic like 50 caliber rifle. In any case, what's up?
I stand corrected.
Not that it's kind of immaterial because none of them would have a place here, for sure. And I could, I guess my thought around this is that it is both, yeah, what John was saying around whether it is approved under our policy, and our policy, I think, is specific only to things like caliber. And I think one of the big failings of, say, like the 87 assault weapons ban was that it was that they fixated on the wrong thing. They focused on the wrong sort of metrics around what they should be banning. And if it's wrong, then we should look at that. But I don't think it is as specific as Lieutenant Turner was saying. And I think that also it is not just the equipment itself, but it is the usage of equipment, because there are some because we have there's specific usage that is disallowed under our policies. There's also specific usage that is disallowed under state law. I think this should say clearly that that equipment should be approved in accordance with state law and local ordinance. And so it's specific to both of those things. So it's not just the equipment itself, but it's also how it's being used.
I just want to quickly clarify something, which is what AB 481 says about equipment, that there's no category established, like except in saying what categories of equipment must be covered. But equipment type is a technical term for the law. And it means any item that shares the same manufacturer model number.
And the language could say no category of military equipment should be used by any law enforcement agency, which would be a broader thing. You wouldn't have to mess with models and makes.
So Jennifer, you're saying it does in fact come down to make and model from the state law perspective.
Yes, but if we go with John's suggestion, then we could instead of saying military equipment, do something around military equipment categories.
Chief Alvin.
So, and I know we're talking about how, we categorize it under whether it's in accordance with the law or with this policy. I mean, I think one of the things we were thinking about, a couple things, is obviously this policy covers two different laws, a state law as well as a local ordinance. And, I think helmets being one of them, for example, I don't think that's under the state law, but it's under our ordinance. So, if you have, say, riot control helmets, you might have an agency that doesn't have necessarily use policy under it, or may use a different type of helmet. I know we're talking about typing may not matter, but they may not have a policy at all. And certainly if we were looking at crowd management, they may come in and may not have something that necessarily fits. And I just can think of a bunch of different examples, even from the process of, if they have to comply with this policy spells out how there is oversight with certainly the police commission and the council. But if you're a county agency, you might not report to a council, you might report to a board of supervisors, or certainly they have a different manner of approval. So those things don't always marry up. And if we're talking about approving items and creating use policies and impact reports for items that we don't currently possess, nor are we looking to possess, i.e. the 50 caliber weapon system or anything that may differ, I just think it becomes a lot really sticky and convoluted. I think I don't want to speak for everybody. I think from the oversight goal, the best thing we want to do is to make sure that all these agencies are coming in with equipment are following what's required of them in their jurisdictions and within the state under their process, and are being deployed in a reasonable manner under mutual aid. And so that's why I think we were looking at the law piece of it, and we don't have to necessarily say just the law. We can spell out the government code on it, but I think that, it's something that's a reasonable ask of agencies that don't bring equipment that haven't gone through your own agency's vetting process.
Okay. Any last words? I think we're about run out the clock on this one.
And if I don't know if anyone I was on the Berkeley website, I pulled down their mutual aid, their crowd control, and their militarized equipment policy. I couldn't find the section on outside agencies following the Berkeley policy. Do you know what policy that's listed under?
So the city council there just passed it last week. So we can, it's a big, long document that they have not yet put into their policy manual. We can definitely send that to you and give you the page number. but it is exactly the language that was in the email that I sent on Friday. And that's exactly the language that all these other jurisdictions have used. You know, what you said, Chief Allison, suggests to me, like the thing about the helmets suggests that the law, referring to the law, might create more problems, even with the citing the code, because if they've got equipment that is not approved under their law or under AB 481, but it is under the local ordinance, then you would have this problem of trying to apply Oakland's policy for helmets to an external agency. I actually think in accordance with this policy makes it better because Oakland will have policy for those things that outside agencies won't. So Oakland will have more types of equipment under its own policy, which means, okay, if we have an approved policy for it, that type of equipment can come in. That's what that says.
I hear that. I hear what you're saying with that. I just think that if they can operate and use helmets in their agency and jurisdiction, and they were coming into our city, but it wasn't the ordinance applied to us, Oakland PD, but not necessarily outside agency, particularly with helmets, that they would not be violating state law or have to go through a process. Say they have different helmets, maybe they have different helmets with obscured face shields where they're not clear, like you can see our face through our shields, or maybe they're ballistic helmets coupled with their riot control helmets or something different. I don't know how we take every agency's unique piece of equipment and try and vet it through our process, which outlined in this policy would require bringing it forward as a type of equipment or unique equipment to the police commission and then to the council for approval, even though we may not possess that type of equipment. I just think that everybody has and utilizes unique equipment under those paradigms. And then again, most agencies wouldn't necessarily have a use policy for things that don't fall under the state law, but under our ordinance. And so that would be another difficulty, is trying to say, okay, well, agency outside, Fremont or San Leandro, you can't come in and use this because you don't have a policy. And our case 7 says you have to have a use policy for this equipment. I just think it starts to present challenges by trying to get agencies to say that they will comport with a document that's very more geared towards Oakland processes, Oakland procedures, and governance of the Oakland Police Department.
Lieutenant Turner.
So just to clarify, John, you're saying that especially if we said military categories, because I think Jennifer did note a kind of an issue there, but if we said military categories should not be used unless it's approved for use in accordance with this policy. So that means, like, let's say City X, their policy is that officers have to have an enormous helmet and they actually get slid around them and they ride in them, and one person pushes the other. And we're like, well, that's crazy. But as long as they say those are our riot helmets, this is how we do in riots, and we have a different policy and training, we push each other like they're in shopping carts, that even though OPD policy would not allow that they would, because a riot helmet is a category of military equipment that is approved for use in accordance with our policy, that they would be able to then come into our city and then push themselves around in their helmets like shopping carts.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Understood. I think
I do want to just one more time just say, if the mutual aid policy were tweaked again in a non-binding fashion to say the agencies that come in are going to hear about the policies that OPD has for all of these types of equipment, not just the less lethals, I think it would be an improvement in addition to this particular piece, which, yeah, I think if you said no categories of military equipment, it means if OPD has the policy, then the other agency can bring that equipment in. But it would mean that the 50 calibers would not be able to come in.
I would probably, so that in that scenario, then we would say, hey, maybe you guys should think about putting the helmets on your heads. And they would say, thanks, we're going to keep riding around in them. And then that would be it. Okay, understood.
So
Right, but
it feels like we are, because under what John is suggesting, sort of interpretation of as long as it's like driving on somebody else's insurance. You know, you're driving somebody else's car, and therefore you're using their insurance. If they bring equipment into our jurisdiction that we have a policy for, then as long as they are appraised of our policy or are allowed usage, then they can use it. But then if K7 is saying no, they can't bring anything that they don't themselves have a policy for, and if they don't say, since we're talking helmets, they don't have a policy for helmets because helmets are standard issue equipment as far as they're concerned and is not specialized and militarized and therefore doesn't need a policy. Then we have and as I understand it, that's two sort of conflicting concepts. Am I wrong there?
What's governing is whether Oakland has the policy.
But is that so? But does K7 say that in fact that they have to have their own policy, or they can just sort of, am I wrong?
For helmets, no, it doesn't require that say that they have to have their own policy, but AB 41 says that they do for other things.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, so I know we talked a lot about helmets. So it worded as such, and I know we've talked a lot about our armored vehicle equipment. Could any agency use a Bearcat within our city for mutual aid? Under the language, if they were to comport with K7?
John, let me try and see if I get this right. Is that we would say, like, let's say we're asking them to come in, we have a crime problem. We would say, hey, we bring in, here's what we suggest how we use this Bearcat. But since a Bearcat armored vehicle, we have a policy that is a category of military equipment, then they could then bring that in. We would tell them these are the ways that we suggest using it. They would follow their own policy, which might be slightly different, might be more restrictive than us. But that whatever policy they have, because it is 481, would have been approved by their specific governing body, city council, county board, et cetera. Is that pretty much correct?
Yes, and I sort of feel like from a community perspective, this is stretching things, because the things that I've heard, like in 2020, were when other agencies came in and they used less lethals, and there was zero accountability, like zero. And so that's, the fact that their policies, what Jennifer cited before, that the sheriff says you can target the head and neck with a less lethal, is really problematic. Like, we would much prefer where the home policy governs and the home policy is good. Like, that's what we would much, much prefer. So what I'm describing here is kind of a minimum, I think.
Yeah, and so similarly to the non-lethal projectiles policy that Jennifer was discussing earlier, the Bearcat policy has a number of not approved usages for the Bearcat that would be reasonably be expected somebody another department to be knowledgeable about that and use that within. I mean, we'd love them to use it within sort of accordance with our Bearcat policies. We have a Bearcat policy. Does that mean that they know what it is and are going to be able to use it in the same way? I think that's where we run into the issue. And under a crisis situation, are they going to be able to be sort of made? Is that all that going to be? Is there going to be a reasonable expectation that is going to be spelled out to everyone?
Who are you asking, David?
Fuck, I don't know. Everyone. I feel like we've painted ourselves into a bit of a corner here. I think I agree with a lot of the sides, but I don't necessarily see a clear way out. I agree with you, John, that they should be acting under our policies and the state law. But also I can see sort of how it is maybe going to be a challenge to implement that.
So I will tell you what I hear out of all this. I hear some agreement. I hear some agreement about the limitations of this particular language in either direction, whether it's with this policy or with the law. I also can sort of extrapolate that what that means is after our September 22nd deadline, we will likely need to fill out the other catalog of use policies for even things that the department might use, but can reasonably expect departments to bring in. Might want to think about what that list of things may be if we want to do that. If not, I don't know. But that is what comes out of this, what I'm hearing. Okay. I think that probably wraps up the conversation of this portion of case 7. Any other parts of case 7 that anyone wants to talk about? Okay, hearing nothing. What would you all like to do next? Want to try to knock out armored vehicles?
Sure, we can do that.
Or can we hear an update about the impact report stuff? Just
Oh, yeah,
brief.
thank you.
Yes. So yeah, impact reports. The update is yes, by the beginning of next month. I think we can provide draft impact reports. We have, so I have gone through and created a template report for our constituent folks to work on and use. And that includes everything Mr. Lindsay Poland and that have talked about, as well as some of the many of the things that we've discussed. So we should have some drafts coming up shortly. I've completed one already that we're looking at internally. So we're on track for next month to look at some drafts.
When you said beginning of next month, I assume that they will not be there for the September 1st date that that we had proposed.
That's what I'm hoping, because it's August 1st right now. So 30 days, I think, is a reasonable time to create a draft for our folks.
So we will plan. I'm starting to like put into where and when we're going to do things. So it sounds like we'll probably be talking about them the 8th, the 12th, the 15th, and the 19th. And there being approximately 10 policies, maybe about three each date.
Sure.
Or so. Okay.
And Joe, would it be useful if we sent you what material we've seen about impacts and track record?
Yeah, I think it would. I know that, right, we will be probably a little more general, right? There's not going to be as many anecdotes, you know, so, but yeah, there's, you know, it's going to be blunt. Some of these, you know, there are things like, you know, some general possible impacts are like deliberate misuse, right? Accidental misuse or poor training, things like that. Just random freak accident, or if the device or item has a, you know, battery or anything that could blow up, you know, so technical problems, right? So we're going to be general about categorizing those things, and then talking about our ways to mitigate, for instance.
And
Yeah.
would you have a medical category too?
Depending on what it is. So yeah, if it's any kind of items that have force implications, are typically going to talk about things like the impacts on that person, what if we miss, things like that, right? So yeah, anything that could be, you know, could have some sort of impact like that. And then sort of perception type things, you know, does it drive a wedge between the public and the community? You know, some impacts like that. Those are the things that we're looking at.
Maybe legal settlements?
Yeah, especially I think pretty much every impact kind of has as an assumption that if something goes wrong, there's a liability, right? This is welcome to America. So
Okay. So why don't we take up armored vehicles, and then after that UAS, and then after that LRAD.
good.
Did you want to keep UAS on the list?
Since we've
I know, we're so
Since
close.
we're almost done, we're so close, right? Exactly. Might as well just finish that one off.
Okay, so sorry, did we say armored vehicles?
Yes.
Yes, so I've got this here on the screen. I apologize for sending it to you guys relatively late today. I kind of ran out of time a little bit, but just very briefly, because I know we are kind of on a clock. So some of the things that I changed, you can see the changes in red there. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit more, but took out this part here, the sentence saying these are what the vehicles are, and actually added this into the table. So it's a little clearer as to what the equipment actually is. And if we need to change it, we can add or subtract from the table without deleting a sentence. Put in purpose here because that is one of the required things. Did reference for other things in terms of in quantity possessed, capabilities, expected lifespan, costs and fiscal impacts and product descriptions of the specific vehicles to the military equipment inventory, which has each of those things in there. Understanding that these are something that is referenced in 481, but also understanding the department's desire at least to get these policies around the use, authorized purpose, authorized use, prohibited use, and training, which are the things that we're really looking at. Did not change anything here except changed this from, it says Bearcat or armored Suburban. So this line now reads, commander shall only authorize deployment of armored vehicles when the specific capabilities of the armored vehicle selected for use. So it's a future proof a little bit. And then also to allow for that discretion in terms of, or not discretion, but a little bit more thoughtfulness for these vehicles. You'll see some changes in the dates too there. And then prohibited uses was already one, as I said, there were minimal edits to this. Training was already a section in the policy. And then finally, this sort of after action part. So I'm not a big fan of putting direct requirements like email because, for instance, I'm trying to do things like with Microsoft Forms or something like that. So I don't want to necessarily say email when we might have something different. But that there is a reference back to that they shall provide that notification to the department's military equipment coordinator, which is a position that's created by K7 or their designee, because they do have some administrative help to allow the completion of the annual military equipment report. It keeps all these things that we required in the original policy and that are also required in the annual report. The only other change instead of specialized resources to say other controlled equipment, because those are things where we are talking about. We do track other specialized resources like canines or the helicopter, but the controlled equipment is the thing that we're really trying to keep track of. And then finally, for auditing, oversight, and transparency, refer back to the K7 and the military equipment funding acquisition and use policy, which controls all so the things around questions about the technology or the equipment, complaints, things to reference back to this main policy. And that is the extent of the changes that I've made. Yes, sir.
John.
I did have a chance to look at this afternoon. It looks really good to me. There's two very small things that I want to suggest. One is in that after action section, that last bullet point, under either AB 41 or the 965 ordinance, helicopters and canines, I believe, are not considered control equipment.
Oh, yeah.
So I would just suggest, replace those with patrol rifles, noise flash diversion devices, etc., or something like that. You could add it to helicopters and canines, but since they are not controlled equipment under this legislation, that might be something else. And then the very last thing is at the very end in that auditing section. Second line says armored vehicles may be considered. I don't think there's any question. So I would just say are considered military equipment.
It's the Suburban, because 7070 seems to see like that a upfit consumer vehicle. That was the only, I was like, because I knew when I had run them side by side, that was the, so they're always controlled equipment under the municipal code. But a suburban, right, specific consumer vehicle as ballistic protection is actually, as far as my reading, is not under 77.
I see. Well, okay, but it says armored vehicles may be considered. So, and armored vehicles is kind of the category in AB 481. I see what you're saying. It's just the way it reads now, it sort of suggests that AB 41 is ambivalent about armored vehicles, or ambiguous, and I don't. Yeah, I'm not sure how to resolve that.
No, it's
Maybe
either,
just some
ahead.
maybe instead of and maybe, and some are considered.
It's for me.
Any other quick thoughts on armored vehicles?
I ran through that checklist I put together for AB 481 and local ordinance requirements. And I'm wondering, Lieutenant, if you had a chance to take a look at it, if there's, I went very quickly, so I'm sure that there's something that I missed that I marked as missing that isn't actually missing. And I'm wondering what you noticed and how we might go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just pull that up from you there. So, yeah, the things that I noted that you marked as missing, absolutely. So costs of the use, costs of potential adverse impacts, annual maintenance, impact statements, alternatives, track record, third party, etc. So all those things are going to be things that we address in the impact report.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Is it helpful, by the way, for me to kind of do that little run through?
It is. Yeah, these are things that we, I've tried to make sure we keep up, but I want to, as we go through both of these, to make sure that there's nothing that we're missing. So this is helpful because then when I take the impact report, I'll make sure to tick off the rest of these. And then we'll know that between the two, we've hit everything we need.
Perfect. I'll keep doing that. And if you see something that I miss and it's totally there and I just missed it, let me know.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Unmanned aerial vehicles. I know that the acronym is UAS. I can never remember what S is. Systems, there it is.
There you go. Sorry.
There it is.
Sorry. Let's see. So a couple things we discussed was the flare and adding that for the components. So I put a camera with thermal imaging capabilities. And then the only other thing I added was that we do have the possibility of putting a removable speaker, not an LRAD, but it is a removable speaker on a drone. So I added that on there.
Thank you for that. Any thoughts on the UAS policy?
Where is the current version at in terms of the retention piece?
So currently, that was when we discussed it with the Privacy Advisory Committee, was we hear data retention. It's still kind of up in the air since we last discussed. When I went and presented before the Privacy Advisory Committee, they requested 5 days. So if it's a criminal case, obviously we are now uploading it on evidence.com and keeping it. If it's anything where we discover that it's not related to some type of criminal case or there's no internal affairs investigation case within 5 days, we're just deleting it from our system. So we still have the 5-day, we're just leaving it at 5 days right now.
I know you had done this on my suggestion, and I think that maybe I wasn't clear enough. I was looking for a minimum retention that would be within the 5 days. I wonder if we can keep, like John suggested in his email, if we can keep that 5 days and just spell out it will be retained for 5 days and then deleted at that point.
I mean, for a minimum of, got it.
Retained for 5 days and then deleted on the 5th day. Or whatever language makes that boundary clear.
Okay.
I guess I'm also thinking that this was vetted extensively by the Privacy Commission, and introducing new language would probably trigger another review by the Privacy Commission. And
Yeah.
so in that respect, I would recommend that we keep what was approved by the Privacy Commission and by the City Council, unless there's a compelling reason to change it. I haven't really heard a compelling reason to change it. So I think we didn't, when we first looked at it, we didn't really know that it had already been vetted in that fashion. So that's my suggestion.
I disagree with that thought. We did know it was vetted by the Privacy Commission. I think my concern was that we have deadlines for lawsuits, administrative investigations, or sort of civil lawsuits that are going to be, that are not within those 5 days, right? And sometimes it takes time for people to make decisions about whether or not they are going to file those claims, make those complaints, or file those lawsuits. That may take longer than 5 days, probably because, well, in worst case scenario, they might be in the hospital in a coma for 5 days. So that sort of situation is rare, because that would probably trigger its own internal investigation, automatic review. But I can think of other situations where someone is maybe on the fence and hasn't triggered that review. And that's why I think for my suggestion, Lieutenant DQ put in the 2-year retention period. I don't know, and I haven't followed up with the Privacy Commission about this particular point, but it is something that I think about a lot, because 5 days is not very much time at all, right? Is not very much time at all. I agree that we should keep it as is for now, not trigger any significant review while we check that out, but that is my concern, and that is what I am thinking about. And again, it's rare that it will be this video footage, right? But
Yeah.
you know, but there's also times when you don't have body worn camera, or it gets turned off, or it's not on, all sorts of things, and it may be the only camera footage. That's where that came from.
I see.
Anyways,
Yeah, you may have known. I didn't know. So
Yeah.
thank you. I appreciate that.
I did want to mention one thing before we get to Jennifer's checklist, and that's at the first page, which is there's a value statement. And it is pretty close to just the sentence above.
Yeah, I saw it. Take it off.
My thought was that you may want an actual value statement in there.
Okay.
I do like as a guide, that I wasn't trying to be snarky or anything, but
Okay.
I
Yeah,
see JT smiling. But in Roman numeral 2, section B, there's a paragraph that's sort of a purpose. There's a lot of good language there that I would draw from, or maybe analogize from, talking about its benefits, its uses, what it's there for, and what importance this particular technology can be, and what the department's sort of, I would say that for a value statement, you'll want what you want to use it for, what the importance of using it for is, and what the department's broad goals are for it. Is it to protect human life by using a robot to do surveillance? Is it to whatever it might be?
maybe also a good place to reaffirm commitment to privacy.
Good point. Should we go through the checklist? I have it up, but Jennifer, why don't you just run us through it?
Sure. So kind of same thing. I worked very quickly. So if there's something that I marked that's missing that is actually present, please just go ahead and say it or change it. Let's make sure that we've got this all right. I don't really know, like the only thing that I thought might be really helpful to call out is it's not very clear about the initial cost, if it's per unit or if it's for the whole batch. So whether the Mavic 2 is 7,800 for all 5 or for each of them. Otherwise, Lieutenant, do you have any questions for me about the things I marked, or thoughts you want to share about how to approach it?
No, I guess to answer your question, it's per cost or per unit. That's about it, though.
Yeah, we do intend to really talk about the most of the costs in the impact reports, because yeah, especially something quickly developing like drone technology, you know, is going to be in these impact reports, because you know, new models hopefully will go up in you know, things that they can do and down in cost.
Yeah. AB 481 says it's the initial cost that they care about. So this is just something to keep in mind.
As I'm going down this checklist, I'll help push this along. I see most of the things that from the other section look like they would go into an impact report, but the 2 that I see that have been marked are uses and effects, which may go into the impact report. And I also see a note about training required. Let's see, section 5, paragraph F. There's a note that says specifies who will ensure training is complete, but not what the required training is. Is that a requirement under either local or AB 481?
So AB 481 says that you have to include the training, including any course required by post that must be completed before anyone is allowed to use a specific type of military equipment. It doesn't say who conducts the training, but rather what the training is.
I see. So this policy says who conducts the training. It describes a little bit about all authorized operators have completed all required FAA and department approved training, but doesn't specifically say what the individual training is. Is there post training on this subject?
So, I mean, I can include all that in the impact report. I can say that the only training initially was FAA, being FAA 107 certified. And then whatever you have as in-house training. So technically there was never really a post-certified school. The Alameda County Sheriff's Department just created their first post-certified school. That's going to be occurring, I think, this month or next month. So I'm trying to get everyone from OPD sent to it. And it's a 40-hour course. But other than that, it's just the FAA 107 certification, and then having your own training set by your own department. So we kind of did our own little in-house training and kind of mimicked Alameda County Sheriff's Department.
Do you anticipate making the post 40-hour training a requirement?
Yes, it'd be nice, absolutely.
Lieutenant Turner?
Yeah, I think Commissioner, you're kind of going where I think I was going to go is that both laws seem to say that the course of training is required. I think that it seems like we probably say that the FAA training is required because that's the law, that we don't get any more specific about exactly what that is because that is subject to change depending on the federal rules. So we just say that whatever is required by the FAA is one, and then what the department seems to want in terms of its training, whether that's going to be, either the post school through Alameda County or hopefully through ourselves at some future point, or if we say that they shall complete the, basic operator course or something like that, would be my suggestion.
Jennifer?
I might encourage us to get a little bit more committed about what that training is. Whether that's the post course, whether that's in-house training, but being a lot more specific about what the training is that's going to be required.
Let's see. The FAA training, I know that it may be subject to change and based on the federal regulations, but is that category of training called something? Initial operator training, initial, like that, is that certificate called anything?
That's a good question. I don't know. Because we haven't had that. So this is the sheriff's department's putting their first one on. So I don't know.
FAA training?
I'm sorry.
The name of the category of the FAA training?
Oh, I'm sorry. So that's FAA 107 certification. I think it's called basic aviator school or basic pilot school.
Okay.
Do you know whether either or any of these include training regarding privacy rights and privacy ethics?
I believe there is, when I attended the FAA 107 certification school, they teach you about how high you can fly, weather conditions, nighttime flying, et cetera, et cetera. I don't recall anything for the FAA 107 certification for anything about ethics. I know we attended a three-day course with the LA Regional Training Center, but I don't remember anything about as far as privacy, ethics, etc.
Or privacy law?
That I recall, no.
That would seem important. Have you seen the syllabus for the sheriff's 40-hour training?
I have not, but we're trying to register for it.
AB 481 does say the training, et cetera, that they must undergo to ensure the full protection of the public's welfare, safety, civil rights, and civil liberties, and full adherence to the policy. Yeah. Anything else on this policy?
You flagged intended uses and effects earlier.
I'm sorry, one more time.
Oh, Commissioner Shea had mentioned intended uses and effects as one of the items he wanted to talk about.
I think intended effects probably go into the impact report. I do see intended uses, which is authorized uses and purposes. You think that covers it?
I wasn't sure if, and maybe John can say more about this, whether authorized use and intended use are meant to be synonyms, or if intended use is much more about the intent behind why you would use a drone.
So intended uses and effects is in the local ordinance. It's not an 8041. And it's part of the impact report in the section on description. So I would understand authorized uses as a different category.
Yeah, I'll say that most of, pretty much everything that we are in the local ordinance that is in that section titled Controlled Equipment Impact Report are things that we're going to discuss in the impact report. There will be some overlap, but yeah, we'll talk more about what the intention is, what kind of effects we hope to achieve with these things like that.
Okay. Well, we will come back to this policy when we get to that impact report. And after Lieutenant DQ, finish up these edits. Hey, Lieutenant Turner.
Yeah, so Commissioner, while we were kind of at this sort of ending point with this one, I was wondering maybe if we could just say, so it sounds like for armored vehicles that we're at a point where now we're waiting for the impact report. And then with this policy, do you think it's fair to say that the edits maybe could be hashed out by email and that we don't have to say schedule time in our next meeting for UAS and then impact report, so that we could kind of push that off a little bit off our docket and then keep it rolling? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Just to make sure, sorry, I don't mean to be a pain about this, but what point should, like, what kind of timeline should we be expecting for that?
For the UAS, hopefully this week. If it's going through the value statement, the other couple edits, and then looking up the FAA 107 name and the syllabus of ACSO, should be too long.
Okay,
That's
great.
just
Thanks.
that's just the policy, not the impact report, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. What I'm going to end up doing is, for this and for armored vehicles or any policies that we get close to, or we're getting to an ending point, I'm going to slot them into one of our September dates to be heard or gone over in conjunction with the impact report, to do one final run through and make sure everything is hit. All right, what did we say we were going to do? LRAD? Do it.
Can you see that or no?
Nope.
Oh,
We
okay.
see your desktop with a lot of icons.
How about here?
There it is.
There you go. You don't have to say about the value statement. I'll change that. I know I sent this last week or like on Friday. Anything you want to go at least just the first page by page instead of going line by line, and this, or if anybody has anything that jumped out to them.
Yeah, since we've had it for a bit, is everyone okay with just like going straight to edits and comments as opposed to once over? Hearing no objection.
I confess I haven't done a review of it yet. I will definitely take a review of it, and if there's anything that didn't come up today, I'll write by email.
Much appreciated. Let's see. I can start unless anybody else wants to, and I will as soon as I can figure out my own markings. So for purpose under B, 2B, second paragraph, it says an LRAD is not designed to be utilized as an area of denial device. If I remember correctly, OPD does not use it as an area denial device, correct?
Correct.
Can we just say that? Can we just say an LRAD shall not be used as an area of denial device? Period. It shall only be used as an effective broadcasting system for instructions, messaging, and warning tones.
Shall now be designed,
Shall not be used.
should not be used. Period.
Period after device. It shall only be used as an effective broadcasting system. And then I had a thought, but I forgot it, so I'll come back to it.
Can I jump in since it's the same section?
Yep.
For the next one, number 2, it says, precautions need to be made when utilizing an LRAD. Prolonged use of warning tones are prohibited. I'm wondering if it's worth defining what a prolonged use is.
I thought I went and said something about 5 seconds, or are you going down to different section?
No, it's that section B, prohibited use, where you were earlier.
Oh, no, that was not prohibited use. That was
Oh, that wasn't?
purpose.
Oh,
It sounded like it, but no, that's purpose.
sorry about that.
It's okay.
Let's go down to that then.
To warning tone or prohibited usage?
Prohibited usage, but if you think that warning tone's the better place to go, then we can go there.
It seems like this is about describing prohibited uses, so maybe whatever it is should go in that section.
All right, let's, why don't we formalize this? What is it about the warning tones that we do not want or want to delineate is a prohibited use?
We want to make sure that that our policy keeps people in Oakland from losing their hearing due to the LRAD use.
How do we do that?
I think it's going to be around limiting the length and frequency of the use. Right, like I don't know if 5 seconds blast with a 1 second delay and then another 5 second blast would and doing that continuously would lead to hearing loss.
And proximity.
So I described about, I went in there to say 2 to 5 seconds, and then I also said, I said 50 feet. So I was looking at a bunch of outside agencies policies. One of them that was really descriptive, I want to say it was either New Jersey or somewhere on the East Coast that kind of described continuous and non-continuous, and I didn't get into that, but kind of took some of their verbiage and looked at some other agencies. So kind of went with the 50 feet and the 2 to 5 seconds. I didn't go with angles. There are some agencies that talk about angles, and I stayed away from angles because I think it's just going to be too difficult for an officer to, is this a 30-degree angle? Is this a 15-degree angle? Is this person standing in this angle? And that gets a little too confusing. And I thought maybe just the feet and meters is better as opposed to angles. So I stayed away from angles because I saw some agencies discussed it and some agencies did not discuss it.
So then where did you land in terms of proximity? Because it says precautions need to be made, but that's not, it doesn't, you know, when using in close proximity, but it doesn't give a number of feet, and it doesn't, precautions need to be made is kind of.
I went on the bottom and authorized to be right here. This is in 50 feet. I can change it up here if we need to.
I didn't see that in the prohibition. That's why.
Oh, I put it in the warning tone. Maybe I didn't put in the prohibited. portion.
Put it in both.
Put in blue. Okay.
Put it in both. Yeah. It's worth putting in both.
I'm wondering if there's a way to say you can't just honk it continuously.
That's why I put the 2 to 5 seconds. Is that
Well, if you blasted it for 5 seconds, took your hand off and then hit it again for 5 seconds, would that fault be allowed? And then just kept doing that for several minutes, would that be allowed?
yeah, I don't see us doing this. I think mainly if you look at outside agencies and you look at the policy here, it's mainly to try to one, get the attention of someone. Hey, I'm going to deliver a message, right? So it's mainly for here, pay attention, get the attention of someone, distract somebody. Here's a warning tone, or some agencies call it an alert tone. So it's 2 different words that they use. So it's not for something. I think if we start saying, hey, I'm just going to keep doing it, I'm not using it to be annoying. I'm using it to try to deliver a message and try to get our message across to someone and gain the attention of either a person or a group of people.
Yeah, that makes sense for that being the intended use. I'm just wondering if there's anything we can do to tighten up the authorized or prohibited use to just build in a little bit more protection for unintended actions that could lead to hearing loss.
So I can look at, like I said, some agencies discuss what a continuous alert or warning tone is, as opposed to some agencies that don't. So I can actually go back and look at some of that verbiage.
Or you could say maybe used once to alert a group.
But what about if we have to use it again, like later on? I mean, I guess at some point, do we say you can't use it, 10 seconds?
It's in the section about prior to delivering a message, right? So it's the circumstance that you just described. Okay, you want to get somebody's attention to deliver a message.
But what if it's used as a distraction? Like, could you use it as a distraction and then 1 second later use it as a distraction again?
You could.
I think what is being discussed is potentially needing more language, if possible, about the manner in which said tone may be used in particular situations, or in the alternative, having outside limits on how it may be used in particular situations. So we can envision a scenario, say, when the LRAD is needed to use the warning tone as a distraction, may require multiple uses. But we want to, keeping in mind with our value statement that will be there, which is protect the safety of both the officers that are using it and the people that it is being used upon, and may want to limit or have precautions about or exact delineations of how it can be used. So if you're going to use it as a distraction, make sure, for example, to not have anyone within feet of it, not have anyone directly in it, or be able to go into of it, whatever it might be. We don't know what it is necessarily. I think that's the information, the language for a device like this that we are, that sort of is, we are hoping to see, so that we know how it can be used, and in what manner, and determine or make sure that it is done so in a safe manner, without just saying, use it in a safe manner, please.
Got it.
Jennifer?
maybe the language we're looking for is under the restricted use section, saying something along the lines of repeated applications are only allowed to deliver message, or repeated applications of the warning tone are only allowed prior to delivering a message. All other repeated use are prohibited.
Just say that one more time, and I'm gonna look at it.
Repeated applications of the warning tone may only be used to deliver prior to delivering a message. All other repeated applications are prohibited. And there's probably a better way to say that, but it's probably an okay place to start.
Can we go up to authorized use, paragraph 4?
I think once we go down, you can't go back up, but okay. That's it, you already passed the page.
Let's see. Paragraph 4, which is LRAD may only be used for the following specified situations. I want to talk about, well, first for the actual line 4, can you take out the and right before LRAD? It's driving me nuts. Sorry, not that one, not that one. On the previous page.
Previous page up here.
Paragraph 4. Starts with a 4. Nope, up.
Uh-huh.
The first word, and LRAD,
Oh, I think it's on LRAD.
that would make a lot of sense, yeah. And then paragraph G, establishing communication with subjects suffering from mental health crises. Do you have parameters for this or envision a certain scenario when you're going to be using it?
I mean, I guess it can fall in line to similar to possibly a barricaded suspect or a subject. I think nowadays, one of the major calls we're going to, I know we have macro and we have, everyone's CIT trained and we have mental health crisis unit, but there's a lot of instances when we are going to calls for service, trying to establish communication, trying to de-escalate something where we're using our PA system to try to establish, have a safe distance from a building or a safe distance from the actual location, but still have visual contact. Where we're using our PA system, where if we know that the LRAD can assist, why not have this tool to assist us to be able to establish some type of communication, with the subject or subjects. If it's that much better, and it can also mitigate a use of force, or also, bring a safe resolution to an incident. That's what I see. I mean, multiple times we're getting calls for service for people, unfortunately, right now, suffering from these crises. Where now, I mean, you can see why we have macro now, right? Why we have 37C51 always responding to calls for service. Why we're getting everybody CIT trained is because these are big things that are happening. So I can see that.
John?
Yeah, it's kind of a broad category. Mental health crisis could be someone who is expressing suicidal thoughts. Could be someone who is not apparently in touch with the same reality we are, unarmed in the street. Could be someone who is in a crisis and is threatening someone else. I mean, that's a broad range. I would really like to see a much better, narrower definition of when this is useful, and also how it's going to be used, how how it is not going to exacerbate the mental condition that someone is in when they feel like people are quacking at them, squawking at them loudly in a way that is not superhuman. It's not very, it's not like a tender touch, right? So I guess I would like both of those things a lot better defined. What kind of situations of mental crisis we're talking about, and how it would be used in a manner that would not exacerbate whatever crisis the person is experiencing.
Joe?
Yeah, I think, and maybe we could, because I think what we're kind of talking about is, the less mental health crises and more where any situations, a lot of them sometimes do turn out to be mental health crises where people are sort of armed, or there's other reasons why we can't come up and communicate at a closer distance. So around possibly where we talk more about establishing communication with persons who are, armed or we believe armed, and that the LRAD can assist communication in line with our de-escalation tactics, techniques, and principles, which is in our use of force policy, because that's kind of where I think we see these a lot of times, people swinging large sticks when we're talking about mental health, swinging large sticks or with edge weapons or something where we are trying to stay away. So, keep them somewhere where they're contained, but where we're not going in and fomenting a crisis. And then also we might use it in these are more barricaded subjects, but like persons who are asleep in vehicles with guns or things like that we've seen in the past as well.
So might it be better, because like you said, sometimes you don't even know whether the person is experiencing a mental health crisis, but they're armed.
Right.
So might a better thing be, instead of including that, saying barricaded and armed subjects, barricaded or armed subjects?
Yeah, I think that might be a place there where we could say barricaded or armed, and then
Armed.
And then maybe just eliminate the thing about communicating with, unless there's something else. It doesn't, like you say, sometimes you don't even know whether the person is experiencing a crisis. What is the reason why, you have to communicate from a distance, I think would be the thing to zero in on.
And also why a PA system in and of itself would not be sufficient. I'm sure there are reasons.
Yeah.
All right, 8 p.m. I think this is one of those ones we have to do. So we will come back to this one. Should we queue up another? Rifles?
so we have, I know, I want to give DQ a little bit of time to relax too. So since he's on stage this whole day, we do have robots. Rifles is one, that I think we can queue up for next time. Let's see, I closed for some reason my list of things.
And again, for robots, there is a little bit more time.
Yeah, that's true as well. So there are some things that we have available. Rifles, chemical munitions, at least the current training bulletin, to include, just made very brief edits that I could send over, but mainly just to change from 37 millimeter to 40 millimeter. So those are available immediately, as well as our specialty impact munition policy. I think all three of those are ones where we can discuss right away and queue those for the next session.
Yeah, let's do that. And let's see. What did I say in terms of dates? Sorry to keep us over while I look this up. I have lots of calendars open. Okay, let's see. When you said giving DQ a time off, you mean like
I'll just not right in, and I'd be like, yeah, robots next.
Wait, like, today?
You mean give him more than the 2 weeks, or don't have him come back if we come back on the 11th?
No, he can come back. He just doesn't like not just first. Like Yeah,
Yeah.
this gotta work. We all gotta work.
Oh, yeah, I feel that. Okay. Yeah, those sound like three good ones to queue up with policies open. We will table robots and poll cameras, sorry DQ, until a little bit, probably sometime in September if we have time, or a little bit past September. As much as we would love to talk about robots and poll cameras. And yeah, I'll take it up. So for now, we're scheduled for August 15th. That'll be the next one unless we all agree to come in on the 11th. I think would be the next soonest. And then I will set out a schedule and see what, if any, timing works for the additional days. Thank you all so much.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.